the most communist leader after Mao Zedong that China had. We believe that China is not anymore communist, but believe me, there is a huge communist school, and all the leadership of China studied Lenin, and is 100% Leninist country, China. And they opened the economy, they didn't open anything. Tried to enter in China, and the company that entered, they found, first of all, partnership 50-50%, close to strategic sectors. Try to invest in China in high-tech, in artificial intelligence, are you laughing? It's completely closed, even the financial market. So why we should buy the screen made in Shenzhen and we can sell anything to them? Why after 5 years? So Trump is looking at what he loves to call the Main Street. He has this fascination of an America that doesn't exist more, maybe never really was so happy as Donald Trump is describing. But it's true, you know, he is not speaking to the elite of New York or Wall Street. That's the contradiction of not understanding Trump. While Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris had the intellectual elite behind during this campaign, he was going to speak with people that were in pain, not because it's tariff now, were in pain, and are in pain because 25 years of economic policy, of openness toward China, and not understanding that China was stealing our richness, our wealth. That's the end of the road. If you don't understand that now it's really a game changer, you think that we come back on talking, on thinking. I do believe that we don't understand that we are really in a point of changing the rules of the game. I don't know if Trump succeeds, because he can fail the election if the recession is big, if the market doesn't respond to his risky strategies. He can lose the midterm election, and maybe China will prevail. But I think at that time, maybe recession is the best thing that can happen. More, because if there is no recession with Xi Jinping, there will be real war.
But it's not only Wall Street, but it's Main Street that is telling everybody that there is just no way that the American, the US manufacturing industry can do what Trump wants to do. It's not a switch. You cannot just open a plant here that doesn't know how to do things. That is practically, it's going to take 2, 3, 4. Some of the people that I heard in an interview, they say 10 years before whatever Trump is advocating to do it is possible, and maybe it's not possible at all. But I'm thinking, going to my next point, and Europe and Italy. I don't want this to be an Italo-centric panel, but we have our Prime Minister Meloni, who's going to visit. Trump is going to be at the White House in a couple of days, in a few days. We have J.D. Vance, who's going to Italy. She's been pitching herself as the bridge, so to speak, as someone who can do a triangulation between Brussels, European Union, Italy, and the US. It's very important. Everybody says to be united. Giorgia Meloni said that she's going to do the interests of everybody. I know it's impossible to do the prediction, but in this kind of theater, in this optic, what do you think she can achieve? Can she talk to Trump and obtain something for Italy, but for the European Union?
So, but that's the main question, because you know the idea, that's a very important visit, of course, because she's coming after the turmoil started. So she's going to be the first European leader to come and talk to Trump and to try to assess the situation and to try to find probably the best road ahead. On the one level, she's a European leader, and so she has claimed that she was going to come and represent also Europe, and then there were some differences in Europe, so the European Union says, no, you're not representing Europe, you're representing Italy. But I think that the trip will be very important. And it's going to be very important because we have to see what kind of treatment and concessions Trump will make to Meloni. Will he really, at a certain point the idea was that Giorgia Meloni was going to be the main bridge between the United States and Europe because of the relationship, because she's a true leader, because she's pragmatic, she is for transatlantic values, she was pro-Ukraine, and so on and so forth. So, that might have been very possible. But things change so rapidly that it's very hard to predict. And then Trump started to see first the British Prime Minister and the French President before Meloni, so that created a little bit of confusion. That it would be in the interest of Trump to have a solid ally within Europe, to give her credibility, and he can give her the credibility that she needs to bring back to Europe. We know that she's coming with some ideas, 0-0, no, in tariffs, for example, let's eliminate them all. But I also think that she could bring some arguments that are being missing. Let me give you an example. President Trump and his people have been saying, look, if you do a direct investment in the US, if you build a factory here, then we will cancel the tariffs. So how do we deal then with Italian companies that have already, and there are many, that have already invested here quite a big deal? I'm thinking about the pharmaceutical industry, which is going to be next. We don't know yet what kind of tariffs they're going to impose on the pharmaceutical industry. Pharmaceutical industry in Italy has done very well. It's now at the second ranking in exports, net exports in the United States, and they fear that something will happen. And yet, there are many companies that have invested billions or hundreds of millions of dollars by buying buying US companies. I'll give you one example. There is a company called Kedrion that has bought a company here that does plasma. And this plasma is exported into Europe and then is manufactured there and then exported again. So shouldn't a trade negotiation keep in mind that this company has invested hundreds of millions of dollars, has 3,000 people working here, and therefore they should develop a formula to counterbalance that. This is not part of the negotiation. Again, I go back to the idea of starting more thorough negotiations, because when you get technical, it becomes more complicated. But this is very important, because you cannot discount the fact that many companies are already invested here in the United States. How do you treat them? We don't know. So I think that Meloni should bring it up, should establish a common ground that would be valid not just for Italy, but for the rest of Europe. It would be a constructive way to develop an idea that is very reasonable and that will marry, in a way, what the administration says. Well, Trump, you're saying do a direct investment, fantastic, but how do we treat those that already have done a direct investment? Shouldn't we address that and do something about it? So there may be something, I hope, that will come up in the agenda that will make the news, and Meloni has a great opportunity if she will be able to do that. I think in order to create a bridge and to become a strong leader within the European Union. European Union that is coming together also on defense. This idea of resisting the idea of doing a common defense is absurd. This is a great opportunity for Europe to come together. Most of the expenditure and people that are resisting in Italy are saying, we're not going to use the money to buy a bullet. We're more pacifist, and this is true on the left and the extreme right. Both Salvini, Conte, etc., are resisting that. Meloni is a little bit in the middle. She would like to see what happens. I think she should definitely go into the direction of a common expenditure on defense. Why? Because those expenditures are mostly in infrastructure, in logistics, in communication. If you increase by 2% the expenditure in defense, you will add 2% to your GDP growth, and you will do it in the real economy. You will not do it in tanks or planes or something like that. So, I think that would be a very important issue also to be discussed. But I stop here because I want to hear what my friend Claudio has to say about that.
Claudio, relationship between Trump and NATO has been, I don't even know how to describe it, but let's say that not of the best, the greatest friendship. He is applying to the country who belong to NATO a very similar approach that he applied to the
Yeah.
meaning that...
I will respond. I know
Yes.
exactly where you're heading. So, he's wrong. Plainly wrong. And I tell you why.
The audience, though,
Yeah.
he
So I tell you why. Because NATO was created by the United States and has been the most important common defense. But on the expenditure side, what Trump is ignoring is that there has been a sort of agreement between the parts, meaning you spend less, we spend more, but then whatever you do, you buy our military equipment, you buy our planes, you buy our tanks, you buy, because we are more advanced. So, in a way, Europe has been financing some of the military industry in the United States by providing money to it. And this is not into the equation, because when we hear President Trump, he just says, Europe, you're sucking us, we are spending money, we are keeping the bases, you're doing nothing, you're not spending. But that's not true. Europe has been doing its part. Now, do we want to change it? Fine, let's change it. It is possible, and I agree that Europe should spend more for economic reasons, for research reasons. Europe is behind, Europe is not together. There was very recently the news that Google has spent the most important, the highest money it has ever spent, $30 billion, to buy an Israeli company that works in cybersecurity, that it is extraordinarily good. So this company was funded by two guys that came from Unit 2800, which is a unit of the defense in Israel, which is strictly high tech. So why don't we have in Europe someone that has been able to develop a $30 billion company? We don't have it. We are behind. We're not together. So the common ground could be the defense industry, but the defense industry that focuses on high tech and development, not just on military planes. Aside, what President Meloni should complain is that we are committed to buy F-35s that are obsolete by the time that they're going to be delivered, and those will cost Italy hundreds of millions of euros. And we because we made a commitment many years ago, but that's not a nice deal for us. But still, we did it. So, Mr. Trump, shall we cancel the order and we move on, or not? Let's see if she has the guts to do that.
Claudio, your thoughts on the defense spending, that it's a very hot topic in Europe and especially in Italy, and what Trump would like for every country to be 2% minimum of the GDP to the defense is not what Italy is doing, and the Minister Crosetto said that we're very far, and they say 5%, and these are just numbers that Italy can and cannot meet at all.
Yeah, of course, we have the debt, and it's very hard to spend for defense, but I agree that can be an investment on our future, as Mario has told. I mean, we don't have to think about defense only with military mind. Of course, it's military, but it's a lot of high tech, and it's not by chance that Israel is the most powerful it's the most powerful military speaking in the world, not in the world, but the most, but it's a superpower, an high-tech superpower, because this is the field where you really develop the best technologies. Mario said on this, when I was in Israel, covering Israel, I covered at that time was the best deal of a startup, Israeli startup deal with Google, always Google. Google buy what we now everybody use, and matter of fact that we can know exactly if you drive from here to, I don't know, in Brooklyn, we know exactly that it's today, now with rain, it's 35 minutes, maybe tomorrow we know it's 20 because there is no rain. This technology that allow now was developed by 3 guys that work in the 8,200 unit, and they were using to track terrorists. And when they end their military service, they built up a startup. First, they will use it still exists, it's a Waze, and Google bought for $1 billion Waze because they didn't have this technology. So military is research, is the most advanced technology, and F-35, Elon Musk defined F-35 an archaeological plane in the drones area. If you think about why we should have F-35 when now all the world we have seen is about drones. So everything going fast. To come to your question, I do believe that Europe must respect at least 2% of contribution for one reason, because you can really think that the Article 5, the collective response to a foreign attack works if you don't spend. I think it's not realistic if you don't spend anything that somebody in the States make the highest sacrifice, maybe protect you with their nuclear weapon, risking that New York or Washington will raise in a matter of seconds, and you say, no, I can't spend, I can spend. That is a commitment, 2% that must be respected. I noticed that the countries, more, if you see the NATO spending, you will look at the countries that are much less developed or rich of Italy, that spend much more in terms of percentage of the GPO. I think you can even make like a mathematic formula. Closer they are to Russia, higher is the spending. So think about, that's the reason. If we really think that our security in Europe is at risk because of Russia, I think there is no matter that we say, no, we don't want to spend in security because we have to develop our economy in another way, in a peace. I am strongly believe in peace, but peace means that you have to deter your enemies or the people that threaten you. So I think it's feasible, and I think it's in Europe you can find a solution for rising euro spending, and I've seen in the last few weeks happening many good developments in spite of the worst one. And the strategy of von der Leyen, I think, is correct in this moment. We have just to find a way to not penalize the countries like Italy that have such a huge debt that we can't buy more debt, because this will really compromise for the future.
I rarely agree with Trump on many things, but on the fact that the percentage should be higher, I think he's right. And the 2% was agreed in 2014 in Wales when there was a big NATO meeting. And you know, it gave Europe 10 years to reach the 2%, and many countries didn't. We have also the limit of Maastricht that limits our deficit, but that could be changed. There is a technicality that we can use, because if you prove that this is not an expense, but it's an investment that will add growth, and if you add growth, you will add income and taxes, and therefore you will reduce your deficit and your debt exposure. You know, there is a mechanism within the European Union, with the Council of Ministries and then with the European Union itself, that you can get an exemption. So
we've been talking about the current state of the geopolitical landscape that you all have described so accurately and precisely. What comes to mind to me in this landscape is a shrinking information space. But at the same time, there's also, given all this complexity, an ever greater need for information, knowledge, and education. Given this, what is the role that, as journalists, you all see for people in your profession within this geopolitical setting? And how can your profession work to help advance the issues that we are discussing today?
Let's start. So information is key, because we need to have a common ground on the basis of which we can make a decision. And if that information is fake, and very often it is fake, and we have fake news, then it becomes impossible to make a decision, and we move into anarchy. And I think that one of the worry here in America within the capitalist system is that the capitalist system works on the basis of the rule of law and on the right information. If you start to sort of hedge out of it, then everything becomes very uncertain and shaky. So, A, information, 2, respect of the rule of law. And I'll just give you one example. The Wall Street Journal has been very critical of President Trump and of his trade approach. Wall Street Journal, the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal is by definition Republican, and it's conservative, and was pro-Trump. And yet on this particular issue, they have really attacked Trump very heavily. And the reason why is not just because they think it's right, but also because they want to prove to their public that they will deliver the right information, that they will not be manipulated by influence of politics, because they will always say whatever they think is right, and therefore the market and the players in the market need to have information that is reliable and is not fake. And I think that there was a double standard in what the Wall Street Journal did. A, ideologically, they went back to the origin, you know, they're for free trade rather than protectionism. But B, they wanted to prove that they are independent of any influence from President Trump, which, as we know, can be very pushy. He forced the TV companies to pay millions of dollars, and even law firms to do the same. And the Wall Street Journal just said, you know what, we don't care. We just tell what we think is right for our readership, because our credibility is more important than the one of the president.
Incredibly challenging to keep up with what's coming out of this White House. The traditional newspapers or media are incredibly overwhelmed by how to respond to everything that's coming out of the White House, and for this reason our job is really important. But I also think that the biggest risk right now is coming from wanting to restrict what the media are saying, and this administration started by several ways. The last one was with AP, in which a court gave permission to the AP to be reinstated in the White House pool, because by calling Gulf of Mexico, by not calling Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, they were strict on that.
It gives us the possibility to see what's going on both sides of the ocean. And I would like to know what are your forecasts, or what do you think will happen between the two central banks in the ECB and the Fed? Will they follow a common path, or their decision will diverge? Thank you.
Should I respond? So for the time being, we see that the central banks are operating quite in sync. What I mean by that is that in sync meaning, we're keeping in mind the responsibility for each area for which they are responsible. Now, there is a main difference between the Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank, because within the mandate of the Federal Reserve, there is not just to keep inflation under control, but also to protect the labor market. So the Federal Reserve has much more of a leeway. But at this point, inflation is prevailing as a worry, and we have seen Jay Powell being very clear in keeping the distance from the political power and the independence of the Federal Reserve. The same is true for the European Central Bank, which is the only true, real, powerful European organization as a whole. Again, they will be all together very shortly at the spring meetings of the IMF World Bank on January 21st through the April 21st through the 26th. But now the name of the game is inflation. And I think that, there's been a lag time in the way that the Fed has acted and the European Central Bank has acted. The Fed has been more aggressive and the European Central Bank came a little later. So we'll see. But I am not worried at this point about the independence of these two key players in the economic world, because I feel that they will not bow to the needs of the political power. We see Trump attacking Powell, he wants him out, and Powell said, I never leave, I stay here, you cannot fire me, and I will keep defending the interests of the American people. So I'm reassured by that.
I agree with Mario. There will be very clear monetary policy, and I don't see the interest rate going down like Trump would like, and inflation. Now, today I read that there is they foresee 4% at the end of the year, so huge rise. So that will be the main drive of the Federal Reserve for sure.
And if I can add, if the Fed will lower the interest rates, that will be bad news for Trump, because that will mean that we're moving into a recession, and therefore deflationary pressures, and so that scenario will come about.
Thank you very much.